You know, for the past few weeks, I've been talking to you about what I see happening in Washington. I've talked about the mess, about not knowing what rules will come next, and about how it's making investors worried and hurting the stability of our markets right here at home. And I have to be honest with you, I thought that was the worst part. I truly did. I thought that if we could just get through this trouble inside our country, we'd be okay. But I was wrong. Over the last couple of weeks, I've spent a lot of time thinking about another part of this problem. A part that honestly is maybe even more worrying than anything happening inside our own country. And that is how the rest of the world is reacting to our mess. More specifically, how our enemies are reacting. You see, I've spent my entire life studying systems, money systems, market systems, business systems, and I've learned one thing. Systems don't work alone. Everything is connected. What happens in Washington doesn't just stay in Washington. It spreads outward across the oceans, and it affects everything. It affects relationships. It affects partnerships. And it affects the balance of power around the world. And this is what worries me, what's truly keeping me up at night. When America, the country that has been the supposed rock of the world's money and political order for nearly 100 years, starts to act wild, when we become unpredictable, it doesn't just create worry. It creates an empty space, a power gap. And a lifetime of experience has taught me, my friends, that nothing in nature or in world politics hates an empty space more than power. An empty space never stays empty for long. Someone or something always steps in to fill it. And that is exactly what we are seeing right now. While we are busy with our legal fights and arguments about rules, while we are distracted by this tweet or that court decision, our enemies are not sitting still. They aren't watching the news and shaking their heads in confusion. No, they are acting. They are moving. They are taking advantage. They are looking at our mess, and they don't see mess. They see a once-in-a-lifetime chance. A chance to rewrite the rules. A chance to change the playing field. A chance to build a new world order, one that doesn't revolve around Washington anymore. And they are grabbing that chance with both hands. And I'm not sure most people in this country even realize it's happening. That is my worst fear. And the two countries leading this charge, it's no surprise, are China and Russia. They are playing a chess game, and they are playing it very well while we don't even seem to realize we're on the board. Let's talk about China first. For decades, China's plan was simple. They wanted to get rich. They made our goods. They bought our bonds. They built their roads and buildings. They were the world's factory, and we were happy to go along with it because it meant cheaper goods and higher profits for our companies. But in the last few years, especially during this mess, their plan has changed. It's gotten bigger. They don't just want to be rich anymore. They want to be the leader. They are looking at our instability, the wild trade wars, the threats to allies, are pulling out of world agreements, and they are sending a very clear message to the rest of the world. They are saying, look, you can't trust Washington anymore. They are unpredictable. They are unreliable. But you can trust us. China is going to countries in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and they aren't coming with threats or demands. They are coming with money. They are coming with building contracts. They are coming with loans for railways and ports and phone networks. They are building their new Silk Road, and they are doing it by showing themselves as the stable partner, the predictable business partner. While we are arguing over whether we're going to keep our promises, China is signing 50-year trade deals. From a pure business view, it's a brilliant move. They are selling the one thing the market wants most certainty, and they are taking it right from under our noses. They are quietly becoming the guarantor of world stability, the very role that we held and are now apparently throwing away. And then you have Russia. Now, Russia's playbook is different from China's. It's just as smart, But it's not about building economies. It's about strategic disruption. If China is playing the long game to become the world's new banker and builder, Russia is playing a more immediate game to become the world's main chaos maker. They're not trying to build a new system. They're trying to tear down the old one, and my goodness, we are making it easy for them. Think about it from their point of view. For decades, their main obstacle has been a strong unified West, a united America, a strong NATO, a predictable set of partnerships that stood against them. Their entire foreign policy has been about finding cracks in that wall. Now, they don't have to look for the cracks. We are handing them a sledgehammer. When they see us publicly questioning our commitment to our oldest allies, when they hear us debate whether our security pacts are a bad deal, they don't just hear words. They see their main goal being accomplished for them free of charge. They don't need to spend billions on propaganda to try and split NATO when we're openly discussing doing it ourselves. They thrive on our division. They turn our uncertainty into a weapon. While China offers stability as an alternative to our chaos, Russia feeds our chaos to make it spread. They see the infighting in Washington, the fights between our institutions, the bitter division, and they pour gasoline on that fire. They use their information networks not to convince us of anything, but just to make us hate each other more, to make us trust our own institutions less. Every day we spend consumed by our own internal dramas is a day Russia gets to act with complete freedom. It's a day they can move troops or make energy deals or run disruption campaigns in neighboring countries, all while our attention is completely focused inward. They are achieving major strategic victories not by beating us, but by simply waiting for us to collapse. It's a terrifyingly effective low-cost strategy. And this is the part that makes me, as an investor, as a businessman, truly alarmed. You see, China and Russia are running two very different strategies. One is building, one is breaking. One is selling stability, the other is spreading instability. They look like opposites, don't they? But here is what you must understand. They are not opposites. They are two sides of the same coin. They are a pincer movement, and the target is the very thing that has been the foundation of American power for over 70 years. It's not just our military. It's not just our corporations. It's the U.S. dollar. The entire world money system, the entire economic order we helped build after World War II rests on one main belief: that the U.S. dollar is the safe place, that it is stable, that it is backed by the strongest, most predictable, and most reliable economy in the world. Everything from the price of oil to international contracts is priced in dollars. Nations hold dollars in their savings as protection against instability. That trust, do you hear me? Trust is our single most valuable thing. It is worth more than all our aircraft carriers combined. It allows us to borrow cheaply, to fund our deficits, and to have huge influence across the globe. And now that anchor is under attack from both sides. China, with its Belt and Road projects and its trade deals, is quietly creating an alternative system. They are signing contracts with countries in their own currency, the yuan, not the dollar. They are building their own digital payment systems to go around ours. They are telling the world, you don't need the dollar. We have another option, a stable one. Meanwhile, Russia, by spreading chaos and division, is attacking the trust part. They are making America look like an unpredictable, chaotic mess. They are making investors and central bankers around the world ask themselves, do we really want to put all of our money in a place that looks like it's on fire? You see, China is building the exit ramp, and Russia is trying to convince everyone they need to use it. It is a devastating 1-2 punch aimed at the very heart of our economic power. And our internal chaos, our policy instability, is handing them the exact tools they need to succeed. And I'm not sure people in Washington are understanding how serious this is. They seem to think this is all a political game. They think the dollar's dominance is permanent. that it's a law of nature. But it is not. It is not a law. It's a privilege. It's a privilege built on decades of predictability, good leadership, and trust. And we are setting that privilege on fire. What happens when that trust truly falls apart? Well, it's not just a problem for bankers on Wall Street. It's a problem for every single one of us. Think about how our country works. We run a massive deficit. We spend far more than we take in. And the only reason we can do that, the only reason is because the rest of the world has been willing to lend us the difference. They lend us money by buying our debt, our treasury bonds. They do this because they believe those bonds are the safest thing on earth. But what happens when that belief weakens? What happens when China, instead of buying our bonds, starts funding a railroad in Africa with yuan? What happens when our allies, nervous about our instability, decide to hold more euros or gold instead of dollars? It means they buy less of our debt, and when demand for something goes down, you have to offer a better deal to sell it. For debt, a better deal means higher interest rates. We would be forced to pay more to borrow the money we need just to keep the lights on. And that, my friends, is when it hits home. Because when it costs the government more to borrow, it costs everyone more to borrow. The interest rate on your mortgage, the rate on your car loan, the credit card debt you carry, the loan a small business needs to make payroll or expand, all of it is tied to that foundational trust. The chaos in Washington, the policy instability, it's not just political theater. It is actively, tangibly making our entire economy more expensive to run. It's a direct tax on every American. And the scariest part, China and Russia don't even have to fire a shot. We are doing the heavy lifting for them. Now, think about what this does to the economy. What happens when the basic cost of everything, that's what interest rates are, the cost of money goes up? I'll tell you what happens because I've seen it before. Businesses stop moving. It's that simple. That new factory a CEO was planning to build, they run the numbers, and with the higher loan payments, it's just not profitable anymore. So they put the plans on hold. That new software system to make the company more efficient, they decide to wait. The expansion into a new state, the hiring of a new sales team, it's all just too risky, too expensive. And what's the first thing that gets cut when businesses get nervous and the cost of borrowing goes up? Hiring. And the second thing, layoffs. But here is the real trap. This is the truly nasty part of the feedback loop. This slowdown isn't happening alone. It's happening at the exact same time that prices for everyday goods are going up. Remember those tariffs we talked about? Those trade wars? Those policies are pushing up the cost of imports, the cost of steel, the cost of electronics, the cost of food. So you get this toxic mix, this economic nightmare. You get rising prices, which is inflation. And at the same time, you get a slowing economy and rising unemployment, which is a recession. There's a word for this. It's called stagflation. It is the worst of all possible worlds. It's like your car is running out of gas, but it's on fire at the same time. The Federal Reserve can't cut rates to help the economy because that would just make the fire of inflation burn hotter, and they can't raise rates to fight the fire because that would slam the brakes on an already stalling car. They become trapped, and this isn't a natural disaster. This isn't a normal business cycle. This is a man-made crisis. It is the direct, predictable, mathematical result of making your country so chaotic and your leadership so unstable that the rest of the world starts to doubt the value of your money. And this is where the picture gets even darker, because this isn't just a theory about economics, this paralysis, this stagflation trap. It's the goal, it's the checkmate that our rivals have been playing for. Because what happens when America is stuck in this economic quicksand? What happens when the Federal Reserve is trapped and our economy is bleeding from both inflation and unemployment? We lose our leverage. We lose our power to act. Think about how America has enforced its will for the last 50 years. It hasn't just been with aircraft carriers, it's been with economic power. The threat of sanctions, the ability to cut countries off from the global financial system, the system that we control, the one that runs on our dollar, that has been our most powerful weapon. But what happens when that weapon turns against you? What happens when we are so economically fragile that we can't afford to sanction anyone because the backlash, the disruption to the markets would be too catastrophic for our own stalled economy? What happens when we threaten to cut a country off from the dollar and they just turn around and say, "Fine, we'll just use China's system instead"? That's the moment we become a giant with no power. Russia sees this. They know that an America consumed by stagflation cannot and will not mount a serious unified economic response to their actions. Our domestic paralysis becomes their green light. They can be more aggressive in their own backyard, more disruptive on the global stage, secure in the knowledge that our main tool, our economic strength, is broken. And China plays the long game. As we are struggling to escape our own trap, they speed up. They pour more money into their global projects. They go to our allies who are also hurting from the instability we've created, and they offer them a lifeline. They offer them stable trade, predictable policy, and access to their massive working economy. They position themselves not as a rival, but as the solution to the American problem. They are separating from us not by building a wall, but by making themselves so necessary to the rest of the world that we become the ones left alone. They are creating a parallel world order, and our chaos is the greatest sales pitch they could have ever asked for. And what about our allies? What about the countries that have stood with us for 50, 60, 70 years, the ones who built their entire post-war economies and security plans around the central fact of a stable, reliable America? Well, I've spent my life looking at partnerships, and a business partnership, a good one, is built on the same thing as a good marriage or a strong alliance: trust, predictability, both sides knowing what the rules are and trusting that the other side will follow them. For decades, that's what we had. Our relationship with Europe, with Japan, with South Korea, it wasn't just built on shared values. It was a mutually helpful business arrangement. We provided a stable security umbrella and access to the largest, most predictable market in the world, ours. In return, they supported our global system. They voted with us. They bought our debt. They were part of the dollar system. It was a fantastic franchise. But now we've taken a sledgehammer to that trust. When you start wild trade wars with your closest partners, when you call them economic enemies, when you question the value of the very alliances that have kept the peace, you are doing something unthinkable. You are telling your most important partners that you are no longer a reliable supplier. And what does any smart CEO do when their single most critical supplier starts acting wild? When they don't know if the shipment will arrive or if the price will suddenly triple, they don't just sit there and hope for the best. That would be wrong. No, they do the only rational thing they can do. They start to spread out their supply chain. They don't do it loudly. They don't hold a press conference and announce they're dumping their old partner, but quietly, carefully, they start to protect themselves. They start looking for other suppliers. They sign trade deals with each other. They strengthen their own internal markets. And yes, they start taking the calls from that other stable supplier who's been knocking on their door for years, China. This isn't betrayal. It's just business. It's a rational, logical response to the risk we created. The chaos in Washington isn't just giving a green light to our rivals. It's forcing our friends to look for the exit. It's the great erosion, and it's happening right in front of us. And what's so frightening about this spreading out is that I don't think it's temporary. You see, when I make an investment decision, I'm looking for a lasting competitive advantage. And when a partner or a customer or an ally makes a decision, they're doing the same thing. They're looking for a lasting, predictable supplier. When you force your most important partners, Europe, Japan, South Korea, to spend billions of dollars and decades of political work to build new systems that don't rely on you, they don't just tear those systems down the moment you decide to become predictable again. No, you have permanently changed the board. You have forced them to build an alternative, and that alternative now exists. You have created your own competition. This is the decoupling everyone has been talking about for years, but we've been looking at it all wrong. We thought it was about us separating from China. But the real dangerous game that's being played, the one China and Russia are taking advantage of, is the world separating from us. China's move is brilliant in a terrifying way. They are stepping into the empty space we created with our allies. They're going to Germany, to France, to the Middle East. And they aren't just saying, buy our goods. They're saying, let's build the future's roads and buildings together. Let's sign 30-year energy deals. And who is their partner in this? Russia. Russia controls the energy. China controls the manufacturing and the finance. It's a vertically integrated solution. One creates the crisis, the energy insecurity, the military threat, and the other sells the long-term solution. It's the oldest business model in the book. Create the problem, then sell the cure. And our allies, who are just trying to run their economies, are being forced to buy this new insurance policy, and every payment they make, every long-term contract they sign is $1 or €1 that is not coming back to our system. It's a permanent erosion of our own lasting competitive advantage. So let's bring this all back home, because what I've just described, this great separating, this pincer movement by China and Russia, this erosion of trust with our allies, it's not some abstract world politics game. It's not a theory. It has a real, tangible, and devastating cost. And that cost is paid right here by American businesses and American workers. For my entire career, American companies have had a built-in, unbeatable advantage, a lasting competitive advantage that no other country could touch. And it wasn't just our innovation or our work ethic, as good as those are. It was our system. It was the fact that the entire world ran on our operating system. The dollar was the language of business. Our legal system was the gold standard for contracts. Our markets were the deepest, most clear, and most stable places to raise money. When a big American company went abroad to compete for a project, they didn't just bring their product. They brought the full faith and credit, the full stability and predictability of the United States with them. That was the franchise, and it was the best franchise in the history of the world. Now we are systematically, deliberately taking that advantage and setting it on fire. Think about a major American company today, a big industrial or a tech company trying to compete globally. They're in a bidding war against a state-backed Chinese competitor for a massive building project in, say, South America or Africa. The Chinese company walks in and says, "We will finance this entire project. We will build it. We will offer you a 30-year loan in our own currency at a fixed rate. We will guarantee you a stable price for energy from our partners in Russia. Our government is stable. Our policy is stable. We are your partner for the next half-century." Then the American CEO walks in. What does he have to offer? A currency that's moving wildly because of political infighting? A government that might sanction or tariff that very country next year over some political fight? He can't get a loan with a predictable rate because our own domestic interest rates are soaring. He can't plan 5 years out, let alone 30, because he has no idea what the rules are going to be. He's not just competing against a company. He's competing against a system. And his own country's system, the one that's supposed to be his greatest asset, has become his single greatest problem. We are sending our best players onto the field and forcing them to wear lead boots while our competitors are handing their players rocket boosters. It's madness. It's just terrible business. And this finally brings me to my own company, to Berkshire. People have been asking me, Warren, you're sitting on a record pile of cash. You've got all this money on the sidelines. Why aren't you investing it? Why aren't you betting on America like you always tell us to do? And I'll tell you what I tell them, and I'll be perfectly honest with you. It's because of everything I just described. You see, my entire life's work, my entire method has been built on one simple idea: finding wonderful American businesses with a lasting competitive advantage, a moat, as I've always called it, and buying them at a fair price. You find a company that does something better than anyone else, that's well managed, that's protected from competition, and you hold it forever. That's the model. And it's worked because America itself has been the biggest, widest moat in the world. But what do you do when the moat itself is being poisoned? What do you do when the government, the very group that is supposed to protect the playing field, is the one throwing rocks into the moat? What do you do when this policy instability, this chaos, this self-inflicted damage is making it impossible for even the best companies to compete? I look at the landscape now, and what do I see? I see a marketplace where I can't price the risk. I simply can't. How do you value a company? How do you predict its earnings out 10 or 20 years when you have no idea what the tariff policy will be in 6 months? When you don't know if our country will be in a trade war with our own allies, when you don't know what the real cost of borrowing will be because trust in our own dollar is eroding, the answer is you can't. So when people see me holding cash, they think it's a bet. They think it's a bet against America. It is not. It is the result of being a rational long-term investor in an irrational short-term environment. It's not a bet. It's a reaction. It's the only logical move on the board. Holding cash is not an investment strategy. It's a statement. It's a statement that the system has become so unpredictable, so chaotic, that the price of admission, the risk you take just by playing the game, is higher than any potential reward. This isn't investing. This is gambling. And I've built my whole life on not being a gambler. And this right here is my worst fear realized. It's the fear I've been hinting at. It's not that China will beat us in competition. It's not that Russia will outsmart us. I have a deep and lasting faith in American creativity and our system of capitalism to win any fair fight. My worst fear, the one that's truly keeping me on the sidelines, is that we will lose this fight by our own hand, that we will give away our greatest thing. That thing isn't our technology. It's not our military. It's not our farmland. Our single greatest, most lasting competitive advantage has always been our system, our trust in the rule of law, our predictable, stable institutions. The simple revolutionary idea that the system is bigger than any one person, that the rules apply to everyone. That is the American franchise. That's what Berkshire Hathaway and every other successful American company has been built on. And now, for the first time in my life, I see that franchise being systematically taken apart, not from the outside, but from the inside. When you have leadership that is, as I've said, simultaneously a political leader and a defendant, when the very institutions of government, from the courts to the regulatory agencies, are themselves being turned into political weapons, when our allies and our rivals look at the United States and can't tell the difference between governing and a personal legal defense strategy, you are attacking the very foundation of your own wealth. This is the chaos China and Russia are taking advantage of. They don't have to create the cracks. They just have to sit back and watch us create them and then pour their money and their propaganda into making those cracks wider. They see us taking our most valuable invisible asset, global trust, and treating it like it's worthless. They see us making worthless the one currency that truly matters. So when I hold cash, I'm not waiting for the economy to turn around. I'm waiting for the sanity to return. I'm waiting for a sign that we as a country understand what our greatest thing actually is and that we've decided to stop setting it on fire. Because until that day comes, there is no fair price. There is no lasting advantage. There's only quicksand. And the great mistake I see being made, the one that our rivals are counting on, is that we here at home, we think this is just a political debate. We think this is politics as usual. We think this is about Republicans versus Democrats. We think this is about who wins the next election cycle. We're all glued to the television watching the drama, the rallies, the court cases, as if it's some kind of spectator sport. We're consumed by it, but China and Russia, they're not watching the sport. They are studying the scoreboard. And the scoreboard they're looking at isn't the poll numbers. They're looking at our bond yields. They're looking at our credit default swaps, the cost to insure against our own government defaulting. They're tracking the flow of money out of our markets. They are counting the number of new trade contracts our allies are signing without us. They understand something that we seem to have tragically forgotten in a global connected world. Ultimate power doesn't just come from the ballot box, and it doesn't just come from a carrier strike group. It comes from the balance sheet. Whose system is more stable? Whose currency is more reliable? Whose government can sign a 30-year contract and give you a believable, trustworthy guarantee that that contract will be honored regardless of who is in office? While we are busy fighting a loud, televised culture war, they are waging a quiet, disciplined economic war, and they are using our own political chaos as their main weapon against us. This isn't a hot war with missiles and tanks. It's a cold war of money and confidence and contracts. And in this new war, the most devastating weapon is not an atom bomb. It's a credit downgrade. It's a foreign central bank holding a press conference to announce it's spreading out its savings away from your currency. We are in a fight for our economic survival, and we haven't even realized the fight has begun. We are too busy fighting ourselves, and that is the greatest exploitation of all. They have successfully turned our own strength, our open, democratic, passionate debate into our single greatest economic vulnerability. And the terrible irony here is that the people in Washington, the ones at the center of this storm, seem to be the only ones who can't see the real danger. They are living under a false belief. It's a false belief I've seen in business many times, usually right before a company goes bankrupt. They believe their position is permanent. They believe the dollar is the reserve currency because it's always been the reserve currency and it will always be the reserve currency. They think this is all just a normal, rowdy political cycle. They think that in 2 years or 6 years, a new person will be in charge, the noise will die down, and the world will just snap right back into place, that our allies will forget, that our rivals will just give up, and the old system will just reboot. As a businessman, I am telling you that is a catastrophic miscalculation. When a brand like Coca-Cola or See's Candies or the US dollar spends decades building a reputation for being the single most reliable, predictable, high-quality product on the planet, that's a moat. That's a monopoly. But when that brand in a fit of madness suddenly becomes unpredictable, unreliable, and toxic, its customers don't just wait patiently for it to get its act together. No, they are forced to find alternatives. And that is what our allies are doing. They are being forced to build new systems. They are being forced to sign deals in other currencies. They are being forced to find new security partners. And here is the part that Washington does not understand. Once those new systems are built, they don't just go away. Once you've spent billions building a new payment network to get around the dollar, you're going to use it. Once you've signed a 30-year energy contract with China, you are locked in. China and Russia aren't just taking advantage of our chaos. They are taking advantage of the time this chaos gives them to build a permanent parallel structure. And we are just letting it happen. We are not just losing market share in the world of trust. We are letting them build a brand new competing supermarket right across the street, and we're handing them the bricks. And this is the great tragic false belief I see in Washington. They seem to believe that survival is the same as success. They think that because they're still standing after all these legal battles, all these investigations, all these political storms, that they must be winning. They look at their survival as a sign of strength. Their supporters see it as resilience, but they are fighting the wrong war. They are winning a noisy political street fight in their own front yard, while the entire neighborhood is being quietly, carefully, and legally bought out from under them by a new landlord. This is the cost I warned about. Every single victory at home, every time they survive another scandal by attacking an institution, by questioning the rule of law, by undermining one of our own agencies, they are paying for that small victory. But they're not paying with their own money. They are paying with our national reputation. They are paying with the world's trust. They are paying piece by piece with the U.S. dollar's dominance. China and Russia, they love the survivor story. They are thrilled to see it because, while the survivor is busy fighting off the next self-inflicted crisis, his entire business, the global franchise of America, is being taken apart. They are letting him win the small, noisy fights at home so they can win the big, silent economic war abroad. And the survivor is so consumed by his own drama, he doesn't even realize his franchise is being stolen. He thinks he's just fine because the tide has gone out and he's still the last one standing on the beach, not realizing the beach itself is now owned by someone else. This is the great mismatch. This is the ultimate imbalance that our rivals are taking advantage of. You see, the very chaos that our leadership is creating, the endless legal battles, the internal fights, the daily political crisis, it forces them into a purely defensive mode. Their entire worldview, their entire ability to work shrinks. It shrinks down to the next 24-hour news cycle, the next court filing, the next rally. They are forced to be purely short-term, just trying to survive the week. There is no 5-year plan. There is no 10-year strategy. There is no deep thinking about what the global financial system will look like in 2040. How can there be? You can't plan a long-term strategy when you're in a constant state of short-term survival. But China and Russia, they are not thinking in 24-hour news cycles. They are thinking in 25-year and 50-year building cycles. While our administration is focused on winning the day on social media, China is literally laying 1,000 miles of railway in Africa. While we are debating the legal merits of a subpoena, Russia is signing a 30-year natural gas deal with a new partner, locking them in. This is the great reversal. This is the most terrifying part. For 70 years, America was the long-term thinker. We built the global systems. We made the 50-year investments. Our rivals were the short-term, chaotic ones. Now, they have learned from us. They are the ones playing the long, patient, careful game of building global, lasting systems. And we have been forced into a corner. We have become the short-term, chaotic, unpredictable player. Our rivals have taken advantage of our internal chaos so well that they have forced us to think just like a banana republic, obsessed with the next crisis, unable to plan for the future, just trying to make it to tomorrow. And you cannot run a global reserve currency. You cannot lead the world when you are running on a 24-hour timeline. And this is where it gets truly dangerous. This is where we tip over from economic erosion into outright system-wide instability. You see, when our allies start to spread out and our rivals start to build their alternative systems, it creates something very dangerous. It creates a feedback loop, a currency death spiral. It works like this. Our political chaos makes a few allies nervous, so they decide to sell a small portion of their dollar reserves and buy some gold or euros. just protection, right? But that act of selling, however small, pushes the value of the dollar down just a little. Meanwhile, China signs a major oil deal with Saudi Arabia, and they agree to do the deal in yuan. Suddenly, that's billions of dollars of oil that are no longer being traded in US dollars. This reduces global demand for the dollar, and it slips a little bit more. Russia sees this and they jump on it. They start spreading rumors, pushing false information campaigns, saying that a few major US banks are in trouble because of the political instability. They don't have to be right, they just have to make people afraid. And now other investors start to get nervous. The pension funds, the other central banks, they see the dollar slipping and they hear the rumors. They think, I don't want to be the last one left holding this bag. So they start to sell too. And now it's not a drip anymore, it's a flow. And that flow very quickly becomes a flood. Every act of selling makes the dollar weaker. And every time the dollar gets weaker, it reinforces everyone else's decision to sell. It's a self-fueling panic. It's herd mentality, and it is the most frightening thing in the world to an investor. Our chaos created the match. China and Russia provided the kindling by building the alternatives. And now the rest of the world is starting to realize they're all standing in a room full of gasoline and nobody wants to be there when the spark finally inevitably lands. And that, my friends, is the checkmate. That is the end game. Because when that flood begins, we have no good moves left on the board. We will have been completely and totally outplayed and the architect of our own destruction. Think about what happens on the day that panic truly sets in when the world is actively, systematically trying to get out of the US dollar. First, the cost of everything we import, and we import a lot, explodes overnight. The price of gasoline, the price of food, the price of medicine, the parts for every electronic device. We would experience a price shock so deep it would make what we've seen so far look like a rounding error. It would be hyperinflation driven not by demand but by a collapse in our own currency's buying power. Second, to stop this, to stop our currency from becoming worthless paper, the Federal Reserve, which we have been attacking and undermining, would be forced to act. They would have no choice. And the only tool they would have left, the only one that could possibly stop the bleeding, would be to raise interest rates. And I'm not talking about a quarter point. I'm talking about emergency catastrophic save the republic level interest rates. 5%, 10%, maybe 20% rates so high they would make it agonizingly painful for anyone to bet against the dollar. They would be trying to attract any money back to our shores with the promise of massive returns. But that cure would be just as deadly as the disease. That level of interest rates wouldn't just slow our economy, it would end it. It would be a bullet to the head. No business could ever get a loan. Every mortgage in the country would be unaffordable. The housing market would cease to exist. Businesses big and small would go bankrupt in a wave on a scale we haven't seen since the 1932. Unemployment would skyrocket to Depression-era levels. That is the trap. That is the choice our chaos would force upon us, hyperinflation or a second Great Depression. And in that moment, our rivals China and Russia don't have to do anything. They don't have to launch a missile. They don't have to send a soldier. They just watch. They won, and so you sit there faced with that impossible choice. Let your currency and the life savings of every citizen be destroyed by hyperinflation or intentionally trigger a depression that will put tens of millions of your own people out of work. This is the ultimate catastrophic failure, and it's the precise, calculated, strategic goal of the entire campaign our rivals have been waging. They used our own chaos, our own internal political drama to back us into a corner from which there is no good escape. This is what I'm talking about when I say I'm sitting on cash. This is the scenario that has me truly terrified. For 50 years, my one simple, unshakable rule has been never bet against America. I have said it, I have believed it, I have lived it. And it has made all of us, not just me, incredibly wealthy. It was the surest bet in the history of the world, because it was a bet on a system of laws, of stability, of predictability, of long-term thinking. But what do you do when the system itself is the one placing the bet against the country? What do you do when the leadership, in a fit of short-term reactive political survival, places a $1 trillion bet that the rest of the world has no choice but to stay with us and then loses? This is the fear I've been trying to put into words. This is the chaos I've been warning about. It's not just noise. It's not just turbulence. It is the act of a nation taking its single greatest asset, the trust of the entire world, the franchise of the US dollar, and pushing it onto the all-in line of a poker table, not even realizing that China and Russia are the other players, and they've already seen our cards. And the rest of us, our allies, our investors, me, we're all just standing around the table watching this happen, frozen because we can't stop the bet. And we're all of us, going to be the ones who pay the price when the hand is finally called. So, this is it. This is the fear. This is the scenario that unfolds when you take a system built on long-term trust and subject it to short-term dealing chaotic leadership. For my entire life, I've seen America face challenges. We've had recessions, we've had wars, we've had terrible internal divisions. But through all of it, the system held. The franchise remained whole. The world's faith in our predictability, in our rule of law, in the simple bedrock idea that our institutions were stronger than any one person. That faith was our anchor. What I'm watching now is the deliberate, systematic unraveling of that anchor. China and Russia, they're not the main movers in this story. They are simply rational, strategic actors doing what any good competitor would do. They see their number one rival taking its most valuable thing and throwing it onto a bonfire, and they are simply warming their hands by the fire and building a new house next to it. You can't even blame them. This is the most brilliant, low-cost world politics victory in the history of the world, and we are handing it to them wrapped in a bow. The true terrifying enemy in this story is our own chaos. Our own inability to see that the political drama we are so consumed by is not just politics. It is the very weapon our rivals are using to bankrupt us without firing a single shot. I've always said never bet against America. It was an easy bet to make. But I was betting on an America that in the end always came together, an America that understood its long-term interests. I'm sitting on the sidelines today holding cash. Not because I've lost faith in the American people, but because I am terrified that I am watching the system. I bet on the very system of trust and predictability that made America the greatest economic force on earth, being sacrificed all for the sake of one man's survival. And that's a bet I'm just not willing to make. I don't know how to figure out that risk. I don't think anyone does.